So, okay, just very briefly, I hold a doctorate in cognitive neuroscience. I specialise in unconscious processing emotion, especially how we can recalibrate the brain just a little bit at a time to make sure we embrace all of these curveballs that keep coming at us. My background is business psychology, and I've owned 3 businesses myself, the largest of which I had 20 staff. So not very big by some people's standards, but I was very proud of 20 staff. So I think that's pretty good. Yeah, so I've mashed it all together, basically. I've also got a love of social anthropology, so I very much bring in culture differences as well as business ideas, as well as how the brain works and the psychology of business. So I do mash it together to become as extremely useful and practical as possible.
And what's the biggest lesson you've learned to date on your entrepreneurial journey when you look back over your many years in business?
Okay, the honest truth is that my biggest lesson is ask for help when you need it. And I say that because I didn't a long time ago, and we lost our business because I didn't ask for help. I was too proud because my business was my baby. And I didn't want anybody to take a slice of it or do anything different to it. And I was very stupid. And I didn't ask, as I say, I didn't ask for help. And that caused an awful lot of problems, huge problems. We nearly lost everything. So we managed to turn it around. But nevertheless, had I have asked for help when I did, it wouldn't have been nearly so painful. So my message is, if you need investment for your business, if you need whatever's going on, tell people, don't hide it.
Thank you for that very honest answer. Is EQ much more important than IQ in a business sense?
Depends who you are in the business. If you are an innovator, an engineer who is sitting in an office creating amazing things, then an IQ in your particular area of expertise is most important. If you are leading a company, if you are the MD, the CEO, or any kind of business leader, then emotional intelligence is exceedingly important, because you have got to be able to motivate your people, influence your people, so that you are all singing from the same song sheet, and that takes emotional intelligence. So it just depends on your position in the organization.
And may I ask, do extroverts make better business leaders?
Now, I had this conversation just the other day, and it's a very interesting question, John. Thank you. Extroverts often, if they are extreme extroverts, are out there building relationships and that, but they may not necessarily notice what is going on with the individual, whereas an introvert is more likely to, because they're slowing down and they are asking questions to work out exactly where that person is, how they're feeling, those sorts of questions. So I would say extroverts and introverts have different talents, but both make good managers.
I think that's a very good answer. And I've worked with some extreme extroverts, and they're very much pace setters, I tend to find. And, you know, when somebody's a little bit down in their mood, they're not good listeners. They prefer to look at the bigger picture, and they're very task oriented. And when a person like an introvert is struggling, they're not the best person to open up to as an extrovert, because they don't listen very well. They want to get the job done. They're very task focused. They're focused on the result.
Yes, and also one has to be very careful, because human beings are not black and white. We are everything, and we sometimes, one part of our personality dominates another part, and tomorrow it might be different. So we're not either just extroverts or just introverts. Very few people are that extreme. Often we can change. And when it comes to personality traits, of course, we do have some control over them. So we can decide what is most valuable to our future and adjust accordingly.
Can you explain why some people become anxious and defensive when the word change is mentioned in a business context?
some people are afraid of change because they're afraid of uncertainty. The brain doesn't like uncertainty, it doesn't do gaps. So if people are feeling uncertain about the change, or they're worried about it, they're feeling anxious about it, the brain is going, okay, I'm out of control now, I need to glean some information. So therefore it will look at the news, or it will talk to different people in the organization, or it will try to fill in a story in your head so that you feel more comfortable with whatever's going on. When that happens, of course, often those stories are not going to come to fruition because they're based on just people's opinions. So therefore, it's not necessarily a good thing. Equally, the brain will always defer to the neural pathways that are very much myelinated, which means that they are used a lot, which means the brain will use less effort and energy to do a particular task or whatever, or to think a particular way. So it will default to the old ways of doing things. What we must understand, of course, is that change is happening. The brain changes all of the time. Okay, it's called neuroplasticity. It changes all of the time. So we're actually always in a state of change. Always. So when we are resistant to change, that is not necessarily a good thing. Not change for change's sake, of course, but think curveballs keep coming. Well, look what we've had. We've had, the last 2 years, especially the massive changes that we have gone through, some terribly agonizing, others just very different, but we have gone through a lot of changes, and we need to not only embrace those changes, but we must never sabotage them, because that's a waste of time. If we're sabotaging change, then we're just prolonging the agony for ourselves and everyone else. So we need to embrace the change. And even, how about this as a tip? How about that we actually encourage failure? How about we practice failure? That we talk to our colleagues, or indeed if we work for ourselves, or that we talk to somebody in a networking group that we might belong to, and we deliberately try to do something that we know is not complete yet, and we set ourselves up to fail, because we will learn from that failure, especially if it doesn't matter that much in the setup of the timeline. So if we set ourselves up to fail at something, we learn from those mistakes so that when we do it properly, we're ready, we're stronger, and we're not afraid of the change. I think that's a really neat way of doing things.
I like that idea of being prepared to fail. I think it's very genuine, and you learn from failure, and you focus your mind more the next time around, and you're closer to actually getting the result when you fail. Because if you set off and you're successful, you could, in your own mind, you could be going down the completely wrong route. And one thing I've found with change is, over the years, I've worked at a number of organizations where there was change, and change was announced. If you have an MD, CEO, or a HR director who's quite heavy-handed about talking about change, that tends to put people on the defensive. If it's announced more gradually and people are brought on board and they understand they have a role to play in the change process, then the defensive barriers will come down and people will get on board and be more proactive. Explain why a busy and stressed business executive would benefit from taking regular exercise.
If we are in overdrive, if we've got our foot on the pedal all the time, on the gas pedal all the time, the accelerator, then we are in the fast lane. We will be living on adrenaline. We will probably be living on cortisol. And when we are doing that, we have put the brain in a very stressful place, including the body. We can't separate them. The brain and the body, you have to treat the same way. So if we are constantly in the fast lane like that, we are not giving, we are living off adrenaline and cortisol. Now, when we do that, adrenaline, if we get stuck in a state of adrenaline secretions, then that can cause us a lot of harm. But if we get stuck in a chronic high level of secretions of cortisol, that's even worse, because it can cause high blood pressure, it can cause heart disease, and perhaps even some cancers. So we need to actually give ourselves some respite and get our foot off the gas sometime during our day. Now, if we don't do that, not only will we put ourselves in a physical and mental negative situation, but equally we don't give ourselves space for creativity. Because if we know the curveballs will keep coming, so we have to think creatively, and to do that we need incubation time. To do that we need time to stare out of the window and watch the rain fall. We need to do that by just going for a walk and just calming things down, so that we think outside of what could become the perceived threat, because we are in a state of anxiety, because we are driving forward so much. So we need to come off the gas. And equally, when we are staring out of that window, or we're having that lovely shower in the morning, or we have just woken up in the morning and we don't have to jump out of bed, we can just lie there and mellow in this lovely, not quite awake, not quite asleep type feeling state, that lovely mellow state. We're then putting the brain in alpha frequency, which is an extremely creative place to be. And that's when we get the answers to problems. You may know that in the shower, all of a sudden, ding, you know something, or you just wake up and you think, oh, that's the answer. So that's what we need to deliberately cultivate. And that's my biggest part of my work, is to show people how they can take more control of their brain, not complete control, because that would be crazy to even think we can, but some modicum of control, so that we feel that we can handle our day better, no matter what comes our way. So to get stuck in a state of anxiety or stress is really not a good way to run a business.
I actually saw a very interesting presentation there by a person called Dave Hall, and he was talking about creativity. And funnily enough, the most creative human beings are people who are 7 to 8 years of age. And the older we get, and as we progress through the school system, into university, to the workplace, our creativity diminishes, believe it or believe it not. That's something interesting I saw there recently. What advice would you give to a person who approaches you because they feel they're losing relevance at work as a person?
Sorry, John, can you ask that question again?
Okay. What advice would you give to a person who approaches you because they feel they're becoming less relevant at work?
Okay. If you ask anybody, no matter who they are, somebody who's only got a small bowl of rice a day, to the person who eats at a banquet every day, no matter where we are in the world, no matter who, no matter how old we are, we need to feel significant. We need to feel relevant. And when that doesn't happen, we feel very, very bad about ourselves. And not only do we feel bad, but equally we are not giving ourselves to our work properly. And any kind of organization we work for, if even our own business, we will not be contributing properly if we are not feeling significant. My advice is this: it is such an important thing to feel that we're relevant. I mean, you've just got to look at an elderly person. If they feel that nobody's listening to them, they feel insignificant, and it causes them a huge amount of pain and hurt and harm. So what we need to do is, if it's for ourselves, we need to perhaps focus on what we have achieved. What is it we've actually done and done well? And my goodness me, if you really start thinking about it and making a note of it, writing it down, give yourself an hour, because you can start, if you start with a timeline, start with whatever pops in your head, start whichever way you want. But all of a sudden that list becomes extremely long, and you look at it and you think, oh, okay, I'm a very significant, relevant person, because look what I've done. I've done all of these things. That will then help you feel a bit more confident. And when we feel confident and we have something to say in any kind of area where we want to feel relevant again, then our body language will be different, our demeanor will be different, the way we approach it will be different. And if we then think about this contribution that we're showing, that we're giving, which shows our relevance, if we've done our homework and we know that actually this is very important, and we then feel more confident with when we deliver it, then that should help people realize your relevance and your significance with your contribution.
It's a very good answer. And actually, I was faced with that very scenario some years ago myself, and I had to organize my own redundancy package. And what I did was I went back to negotiate my package. I listed out all the achievements I had in my employment with that company, and I was very proud to do that, and it contributed towards getting a very good redundancy package for myself at the time. So I was delighted. And your
Well done. Do you know,
answer,
John, that I talk to a lot of managers about this. I get very cross when they think they have to tell people what's wrong with them to justify the redundancy. Redundancy is a business decision. It's not a personal decision. So why pull people down? It's wrong. It should not be that way. You shouldn't have to think, oh my goodness, I'm going to be criticized for making somebody redundant because if I tell them how wonderful they are. No, you can actually. It's like there is a certain way that you can deliver news about redundancy that doesn't break people, and it shouldn't break people. So well done for doing that, John. That's fantastic.
thank you. We have a bit of comic relief because we're having a very serious discussion here, and sometimes it's good to lighten the mood. Or were you one of those people when you were a child who asked your mum and dad where you came from?
Oh no, yes, of course. I remember that. I can remember I was 10 years old and I learned how to biological reproduction, human reproduction at school. And I said to I thought and I forgive me if this is a bit too graphic, but I am into biology rather a lot. But I thought the sperm jumped across the bed. I didn't know about the actual act of reproduction. And I told my grandfather, who was very straight-laced, and I adored him. I went, I now know where babies come from. He was mortified. He didn't know how to handle the question at all. He didn't know, but he didn't realize that I didn't actually know the whole story. But oh gosh, and I've got stories the same with when my children. I can remember when my daughter learnt about reproduction at school, again at about the age of 10. We as parents were invited into school, excuse me, to see this film, which was a very good film. And so we knew what the children were going to see. And then my daughter got in the back of my car coming home from school. She said, Mummy, I now know where babies come from. I said, okay, great stuff. I said, and off I went. Well, Daddy and we tried 2.5 years to have you. She went, you did it more than once. I was driving like this. Dear, oh dear. It was very embarrassing.
Great response from your daughter. Anyway, that's a good story to tell. What impact do you think the Great Resignation and working from home will have on the traditional relationship between an employer and their employees?
Well, I think there are two answers to that. There is one that I hope, and there's probably more one that's a reality. The one that I hope is that there will be a greater respect because people are doing their own thing. But you could actually flip that coin and say that could be making us more selfish, because we're not actually working, excuse me, for the greater good in inverted commas. So there could be one of two ways, I think, of this going. I think as we are now realizing that, goodness me, this pandemic has made people really rethink what they want in life. And a lot of people are now have decided to change course completely. Fantastic, absolutely great. Whether that will continue, because let's face it, the next generation coming through won't have gone through 2 years that we have gone through. Excuse me. So therefore we might flip back to how it was. Equally, there's going to be a lot of people out there wanting to do their own thing, which is absolutely fantastic. Whether or not that is sustainable, will only time will tell. So maybe they'll go back into an organization. So there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of ways it could go. In terms of relationships at the moment, in terms of bosses and employees, and I'm hoping that what this will encourage is more respect for one another, and the realization that in actual fact we can work from home easily because we have shown we can be more flexible in the way employees work, and we do not have to micromanage. because there are still a lot of bosses out there who think they've got to micromanage people's time, which is crazy thinking, because I know a lot of people who work from home and they work longer hours than they would if they went to the office. So there's an awful lot of yes, but what ifs. So there's a few ways that it can go, but let's hope that it's for the better.
I'm going to touch on maybe a nerve here with you. You live in the children's, Lynda, and the HS2, the high-speed line between London and Birmingham, is under construction. Is your village impacted by the construction works?
It certainly is. It really, really is. Our village is beautiful. In fact, Dad's Army was filmed in our village for a few episodes. We've still got the same butchers. We've still got the same bakers. It's lovely, and it's very easy to get into London. It's not urban, it's not rural at all. It's more urban, but it's a beautiful village. And certainly there is one of our fields by our village pond that the HS2 people have told us they have the rights to do whatever they want when they want, which is and for as long as they want, but it won't be permanent. That is the news we've just had. And equally, the surrounding villages and towns right the way through the Chilterns here are very badly impacted. Massive wide roads, really, really wider than motorways, have gone through countryside. And it's dreadful. It is really awful what's happening. And in terms of wildlife, in terms of nature, in terms of we need grass, we need green, we need to breathe. And equally, of course, the impact is going to get worse because it's going to be fleets and fleets of lorries in there, hundreds, maybe thousands a week, taking the spoil out of the ground and can blocking up the roads for many miles around. So HS2 has got a very negative impact on this area.
Thank you for that answer, Lynda. It's very honest and it's from the heart. I have three takeaways today for the audience, and they are as follows from this meeting today. Firstly, never be so proud that you won't ask for help. I think that's a lesson I have learned in business also. Secondly, take regular exercise because it helps to control the adrenaline and also our cortisol levels, which are increased through stress at work. And thirdly, hopefully, with the great resignation and the work from home trend, there's going to be more respect between employers and employees going forward. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience today, Lynda?
Well, lighten up. You know, some of our work is extremely serious, absolutely, 100%, but we don't have to take ourselves seriously. So just lighten up a little bit, have fun with what's going on, enjoy your life. You know, I go up to bed every night and I think, okay, that day's gone, job done. I'm thinking, oh, another day's gone. So it's like, so what have I done? It doesn't have to be a day of, oh my gosh, I got this and this done. It can be just a day like, actually, I had a wonderful walk and I laughed with some of my family and friends. We need to lighten up and make sure that that we are enjoying what we do as best as we can. And even when the things go wrong, that we know that we're going to enjoy life again, much more so than ever. So just lighten up.
That's a great answer. And thank you for that, because I like a good joke myself at the odd time. And it's important to have a laugh because it helps to relieve stress.
It does.
And on that note, I'll end today's meeting. Thank you for your time today, Lynda.
Thank you, John. It's lovely talking with you.